Hi, everyone. Buongiorno. Greg, thanks for accepting the invite.
It's a pleasure to be here. Great to see you again.
Main reason we're here, of course, is because while I was writing the book with Professor Kotler, we spent some time together discussing branding, discussing purpose, discussing brand personality, brand. Uh, what's the DNA of the brand? What about the fact that the world is changing? And when it comes to building emotional connections, for example, in a retail space, technology is playing a role, and what is the role of AI, what the role that AI plays in the equation, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to discuss some of these topics with you live, so that we can just share it online and people can just enjoy this conversation and learn from you as much as I did while I was, writing the book. I guess the very first question is linked to, of course, your book, your work, your career, and it's related to brand personality. So we discussed a lot about this, and the idea is that the way people build relationships with other people is quite similar to the way they build a relationship with a brand, right? You establish an emotional connection. Then, if you feel well, you want to spend more time with the counterpart, and perhaps you want to bring your friends, and perhaps you want to use that relationship also to communicate with others and to say that you belong to that community, group, other person, brand. And this dynamic is quite, let's say, linked to the human nature, and it's been there forever. So I'd love you to articulate a bit more on how we customers build relationships with brands, and specifically when it comes to counterintuitive or controversial
Sure.
decisions that brands might end up taking, which is pretty much the same when human beings do something that creates a friction that we don't really understand and like, and that can break the relationship or maybe nurture
Yes.
the relationship in terms of authenticity. So you're master and commander when it comes to this topic. So over to you, and please tell me more.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. And I guess I would start with the premise, and something I truly believe is that consumers want to feel like there's a human being on the other side of their screen or the door, if we're talking physical
Mhm.
retail, versus machines and robots, right? And I think so. I always start there. So our job in terms of building a brand is to make sure that we're not only communicating all the rational value in our products, right, and our services, but we're also delivering emotional value, which is essentially um, helping people feel not just about us, but feeling that they have more self belief, self confidence, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. Our brand through our products is going to be on that journey with them. Hard to do that if they can't feel your values and characteristics that make you unique from everybody else. So part of a brand personality is making sure you're not simply just a commodity.
Mhm.
Like if a consumer goes to the virtual or physical shelf, they need to be able to recall something that made them feel a certain way so that they're willing to pay beyond the medium price point of a particular product in a category. So that's our job, right? And I think just like human beings, if you and I, every time we connected, I said the same thing in the same tone of voice, you would probably get pretty bored or annoyed, one of the two. So the reason I say we're a mosaic of traits and characteristics, and that we have to oftentimes, um, over a course of a season or over a year, make sure that variety and mosaic is making its way into the marketplace, right? So people can see our whole selves as a brand, right? Now, you asked the question, what happens though when you exercise your voice as a brand and it doesn't necessarily appeal to everyone? And by the way, I believe we should always be pursuing that rarefied place where we are both accessible and
Excellent.
aspirational as a brand. What I would say there is you never sit down to create a campaign and say, we want to be provocative or we want to be polarizing. That's an outcome that is an opinion from the collective perception of the audience. Your job is to deliver a sharp insight or reveal a truth about your product or what you believe, and use creativity and ingenuity to express it in a profound way. And yes, you have to be sensitive and tuned into the world and the consumer's experience at that given point in time and what's happening in culture. So when you do express that story, it has a better chance of resonating versus being tone deaf, right? But I always say, when you sit down and you start uh, talking about the dimensions of your brand personality, there's a difference between characteristics like curiosity, courage, empathy, versus saying we're provocative, we're polarizing. That is what after you get to the outcome, that will be decided, but that shouldn't be the original point. And at the end of the day, you need to have a strong point of view, whether it's your retail presentation, your retail theater, or the way you create content, whatever it is, just simply reporting the news, meaning simply communicating things we can all already see and already know, isn't going to be enough.
Would you say that this is true also for mass market brands? Because I hear you, of course, and this is the best way to build a brand that is just standing out, right? That everybody would talk about it, everybody would love to connect with. But at the same time, exactly as it happens for people, some of us, or in some phases of our life, we just don't want to be noticed. We just want to be average. I mean, I don't know, probably it's not the right way to say. And for some brands, this could be also a strategy, right? Maybe you just want to appeal as many people as possible. Maybe you are a soap or a shampoo or a toothbrush, and what you want is just be the right product for the average customer so that you maximize the number of people who would find you interesting or an interesting option. So is that the case, or the way you build it is always the same?
Yeah, well, what you speak to is there's certainly a continuum in terms of purchase decisions made based on emotion. Certainly, you'd go all the way over to this left side, maybe your
Yeah,
right side, and you
more
have
rational.
the luxury industry, right?
Mhm.
Where a lot of it's based on emotional impulse, that purchase. And maybe over on the other side of the continuum, you have things like getting gas, for instance,
Yeah,
convenience and price, right? But at the end of the day, it's still a competition, right? And at the end of the day, still believe, even if the percentage is quite low in as you said, maybe a larger, broader uh, business proposition that's based on convenience and price, I still feel you have to do the work to reveal your identity and your voice in a way that's distinct and separate than the rest
yeah,
on that. With that
yeah,
said, because again, I love being in the room and having to harmonize opposing forces, right? Because you're also right. Is the consumer waiting for us to deliver their daily inspiration? Well, guess what? They can get that from a credible array of sources, right?
yeah,
So I think you've talked about this too, about this humility mixed
yeah,
with confidence. And I've always felt like the best brands and teams, leaders, have that mix of self-confidence and self-awareness and selflessness so that you can see further and deeper into the desires and the lived-in experience of customers to serve them better versus there's honestly nothing's more deadly for a brand than hubris, to feel like it has all the answers.
Amazing. And I love that that the conversation is naturally shifting towards leadership because, I really loved your book, Emotion by Design. And if there is one thing that I have learned is that this is true for brands and it's true for human beings. That's why I was trying to draw this parallel. And the idea in the book was to talk about what are the traits of a leader, and we try to build on both, the business literature and the theories, but also on specifically my experience as a CEO, interacting on a daily basis with CEOs, like our clients. And so we try to be very practical, right? So we tend to say that we like the idea of a servant leadership. We believe this is probably the best expression of a contemporary leadership, considering the world and considering the uncertainty and the volatility of the market. So again, you need to be, as you've said, humble enough, but also ambitious. Humble enough to admit that you don't have the answers, but ambitious enough to to push, to be there, to try and learn by doing and get the job done and continuous improvement and so on and so forth. But at the same time, there are circumstances, for example, in the middle of a turnaround, where maybe you need a different leadership style. So it's never about the hubris. It's never about I'm a know-it-all, but maybe you need to be more assertive. Maybe you need to reassure everyone that you are in control. And so your leadership style is probably closer to a more command and control leadership style. So we tend to be very practical in the book, and I know you like this down to earth approach, coming from your experience as a practitioner. Um, in the book, you talk a lot about what is the right leadership and what are the risks of a siloed organization. And this reminds me of what we talk in the book when we say that we should be also, other than ambitious, so humble and ambitious, we should also be ambidextrous. So we basically build on this idea of organizational ambidexterity and how to change, how to embrace change in a complex organization. And it's maybe siloed. We cannot just break silos overnight, embrace change and shift, because we have the responsibility of the people we manage. The DNA of the brand is built in a way that it doesn't happen in a vacuum and it doesn't happen overnight. So you need time to change things. So how do you see this, and what is the right approach, the approach that you would recommend leaders when it comes to embracing change in an established, maybe big, large organization?
Yeah, no, fantastic question. And I was lucky enough to grow up in a business culture where one of the maxims was evolve immediately. So imagine coming to work every day and having that, figuratively speaking, on the wall, evolve immediately. And essentially, what that was instilling is ensuring that we never got complacent. We never took success for granted. And at the end of the day, I think there are various parts of within our organizations, certainly within big companies, where there's revolutionary or incremental shifts that you're trying to achieve. I think what's wonderful about 3-year strategic plans, not to get into the details too deeply here, because oftentimes some of the brands that I'm advising, they are simply looking at the near term and basically saying, we don't think we can achieve this, right? We don't think we could achieve a membership program this year. We don't, whatever that is, right? And the reality is, it's um, creating that journey, right? First, defining the destination of in service of the customer, we need to be here. And then creating the steps to achieve that and articulating that clearly to your organization, but realizing, to your point, that these shifts don't come overnight. I've been in this business for a long time, and just the way, moving from the broadcast era, right, where brands broadcast their messages at customers, and there was no conversation. It was one-way communication.
Yeah.
And then moving to this era of personalization at scale, where suddenly you not only had to reach, the masses and get as much attention and awareness as possible, but you had to speak to the individual and make sure you never forgot their name. And of course, today, not only do you need to speak one to each customer, if you will, but you need to build that brand community. And guess what? You're co-creating the way the community operates, the way you communicate your stories, the way you build the world of your brand. So much of that now within this creator and maker culture we're in is a collaboration, not just internally with our teammates within the business, but in some ways, your teammates also now are the customers
Yeah.
on that. And so, to your point, I would just reiterate that, hey, when you talk to me, you're going to get a lot of sports metaphors and
Of
analogies,
course,
right?
I do
But
expect that.
but it's yeah, sometimes it's a sprint and sometimes it's a marathon, and identify what race you're running when you talk about transformation. And then, by the way, just like in sports, the key attributes to achieve transformation are, of course, speed and agility by the winning teams on the field, but also within business, because at the end of the day, if you're not moving at the speed of the customer, which is moving so fast right now, if you're not there when they need you most, then they simply will just go and engage and
somewhere
create a
else.
relationship with someone else.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I really like this metaphor, but also that you have reminded us that, well, first that you reminded the two of us that we've been in this business for a while. It reminded me of when I was with AKQA, and you were the counterpart. So, and on our wall, uh, the statement was passion for turning what if into what's next, which is this
Okay.
idea that it's very inspiring. I really like it, but this idea that it's turning what if into what's next, you cannot do it in a top down one way uh, sort of approach, which was probably the case a long time ago when we started. We were very young at the time, but it's different, right? It's conversation, it's an interaction, it's co-creation, co-design, and I really love this. And this leads me to another point that we cover in the book, and it's this idea that our job is no longer about making people want things; it's more about making things people want. Which doesn't mean, of course, let's ask people what they want and let's make another pair of shoes or another product. It doesn't work like that. But it's let's elaborate on that insight. Let's build on what we've noticed there. Let's create a product. Let's launch a service. Let's create an experience around that insight that we have to elaborate as human beings, as creatives, as strategists, as professional marketers. I guess my question is, what do you think about this shift from making people want things, which was the push top down, maybe one way, media muscle with big budgets to convince people to buy yet another product? And so the question for companies was, what else can we make and sell? And this shift downwards or downstream, where the right question is, what else I can do for the customer? And the battleground is the customer experience. And I need to learn from the customer, listen to the customer, and infer what makes sense to produce. In the past or in the recent past, this would be exclusively about our ability, like the two of us and people like us, to elaborate and build on those insights. Now we also have something which is the elephant in the room called generative AI that will play a role. So I guess the question is first, making people want things, becoming making things people want. Is human elaboration? Do we need technology? Is technology, specifically Gen AI, going to replace our ability to elaborate those insights and create something because it's more efficient, it's cheaper, it doesn't go on holidays, and it doesn't,
That's right.
It's never sick,
Yeah, well, maybe two things in there, because
at least.
there's a lot there, and I would say that the ratio of what percentage of your business is based on listening and responding to consumers' desires and aspirations in real time, and also reading and responding to the marketplace, right? You could say maybe that 80% of the output, the products and the storytelling around that, is operating within that uh, process, that cycle of customer input, right? At the same time, whether it's 10%, 20%, 5%, how do you expect to take customers to a new place if you're not going to go there first yourself? And it's quite frankly impossible. So that idea of delivering products and services and innovation that they simply couldn't imagine, right, is still extremely important, right? Because if you're not doing it, guess what? Your competitors, especially the up and coming hungry competitors,
Can do the
you and I
same.
have been part of business categories where we go from last place to first place. There's nothing more fulfilling, right, than that fight, right? Because you're so hungry and you're
Yeah,
never complacent on that. So this, because I get this asked this a lot, like what in terms of maybe innovation that isn't on a business plan or isn't briefed at all, but there's a culture there to introduce new ideas through conversations and forums within a business culture because you embrace that, versus you're in a culture where there is no room to discuss anything that's not on the plan. To your point, that the consumer hasn't told us exactly what they want. And so when it, it you want to avoid being completely in a culture of waiting and asking for permission, right? Because what sports teams that are successful do that? None. You're on the front foot. So you have incredible vision, right? And awareness. I don't care if it's a field or a court, but you're moving, you're on the offense, if you will. So um, again, what I love about what we do is there are a lot of contradictions. It is very messy, this strategic and creative process to deliver game-changing products, or products that have a great chance to occupy that rarefied place in people's minds, right?
right.
Where a product plays a bigger role in their life beyond just its use. I think there's just an art to do that. And guess what? AI, artificial intelligence, is now part of your team. It's not it's no longer a debate about whether it's bittersweet or not. It's basically uh, meet your new teammate, and how are they going to insert themselves and be a part of this radical collaboration that happens between high performing teams. And what I found, certainly in the creative process, is your ability to ideate and iterate on a subject, whether it's writing, whether it's imaging, whatever it is greatly enhanced. But you still have to have your hands on the steering wheel,
Yeah,
right?
I like this idea of AI as a teammate, as a workaholic co-worker that
There's
never
that.
sleeps.
That
Always,
that
always there.
that's so true. And so, but with that said, without, just like any employee, without direction and support and prompting
Would be lost.
and the ability to how are you going to evaluate success, all the things we do, without those, honestly, you can't expect great outcomes with artificial intelligence in terms of being part of that process. So that's why I say, think of it as a teammate and
Yeah, no, totally. I love that.
get past the constant maybe arguments about the pros and cons, and instead spend your time on figuring out how to leverage it in a way that's not just a project or an initiative, that it's a living, breathing teammate within
Yeah,
your office.
I love it because it also helps moving from the narrative that is just a means to an end, or an enabler, or a technology that will be surpassed by another technology in the future, that we've been here, done that in the past, we will adapt, da, da, da. As you said, it's here to stay. It will be probably, it will evolve, but it's here to stay. It's a co-worker, workaholic co-worker, and we need to deal with it. We need to get the most out of the potential that it has, and let's try to figure it out. That makes sense. I think we have time to discuss one more point. In the book, we call it Be Purposeful. And it's this idea that either you know why you are in business, either you know you are able and you give. It's not give, you make your people feel, as you said before, in a way that they feel like they belong, that they would come and they feel like they're part of something. And this is true for your people, so your colleagues, your employees, your shareholders, your stakeholders at large, even when it comes to your business partners. They should see a clear light, a clear reason to be, a clear reason to do whatever you do. And this goes back also to the being a distinctive organization, or delivering a distinctive message in a world where it's, at least in the privileged part of the world, it's always or often about the paradox of choice, right? Having too many options, having too many brands, having different companies you can work with, having different employers you can work for, and so on and so forth. Being purposeful is what can set set you apart as an organization. It's what gives people, your people, a reason to wake up in the morning, go there and contribute and feel like they're doing something that makes sense for the world, for them, so they can get paid for, and probably, hopefully, also for the people they serve with their product, services, and experiences. At the same time, with the same approach, down to earth, that we like, we also say, yeah, but it's hard, especially if you're an established business, especially because companies need time to change, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. If you have to switch from a different approach to the business, where certain variables didn't play such an important role, it's hard. You need to change the mindset of the people that are leading the organization and that you lead in some cases. You need to change the processes. You need to change the priorities. You need to deal, perhaps, if you're a public company, with the fact that you will need to invest a lot of money, and this will pay back in 5 or 6 years. And probably you need to deal with the fact that you will get pressure from your shareholders and from the stock exchange. And you need to deal with the fact that the average tenure of a CMO is 3, 4, 5 years when you're lucky. And these projects are long-term projects. So would you start a project if you don't really see the results, and someone else will probably benefit from what you have started, knowing that you're probably living in a couple of years? Tons of questions. I know this is not something we will solve now. I just wanted to pick your brain on this, and again, if you were to provide, the word with your perspective, with your tips, with your advice, what would it be, that single bullet that you would like to, should?
Well, I do live by this idea that what you sell isn't only your products and services, what you also sell is your purpose and promise. So you have to be incredibly clear on what that purpose and promise is. And I really like working with teams of executives or employees from all aspects within brands to work on audacious vision statements where you put a stake out into the future. And I loved visiting the team in Sweden this year, the design team at Volvo, because they have this audacious vision. By 2030 they will be 100% electric,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So we're 6 years away from that. But I love that they have this moment in time, this destination that they are inviting customers to be a part of on that journey. That's the pursuit. And I think when we talk about sustainable innovation and circular design in business, right, which we should all be practicing, right? Because at the end of the day, certainly as a father of two kids, I certainly want them to be able to continue to live in a world better than how I leave it, right? It's good to start with the articulation of something that may even seem out of reach, right? But the point is that you put it on the horizon, and then you're going to create a series of moments and gates to progress to, right? Back to this, as I've done, and I got a lot of mantras for you, right? But I've always also believed that, good or average brands are great at creating moments, but the very best brands create these movements, right?
Mhm.
And I worked at the brand Nike for a couple of decades, and it was really a movement of human potential, right? Helping everyone achieve their athletic potential on their terms. Well, wow, what a motivator to come to work every day knowing that that was your pursuit, and the consequence was of that was selling products, right? That came after, right? It's start with a great strategy, purpose, promise, and vision on that. And so that's a question to always ask companies. Are your products an invitation to something bigger, to something more audacious, to something that when we get to pursue it together, we're all going to benefit from it?
Yeah, I like this idea that the product at some point becomes the means through which, or the magic object through which you feel and experience that dream, that purpose, that idea, right? So it's the consequence of something well crafted, and it's the means for the customer to join that community, to marry that dream. And so it's just it's connecting tissue, if you want, of the two things. And it's yeah, I really like that. Greg, thanks so much for your time. I mean, I'll speak with you for hours, and I'm sure we will do it in the future. But this was the idea was to spend 20, 25 minutes together talking about some of the topics we covered in the book and we care about. And thanks so much for accepting the invite and for being here.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It's been a great way to spend a morning with you. And next time we'll do it in person.
Absolutely. And by the way, just remind me how many Emotion by Design, your last book, in how many language has been translated already?
14 languages. So
Wonderful.
it's
You're my
definitely,
benchmark. We're a bit behind, but we will catch up.
I have no doubt you'll get there and maybe surpass it.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay, cheers.